Hello, I'm Chantal Havia from the Ybor City Museum Society and the Tampa Baseball Museum at the Alopa's House. And you're watching Tampa Bay Community Network.
Hello and welcome to Culture Vultures. My name is Linda Saul-Sena and I have two great guests today. We have Chantal Havia and Elizabeth McCoy from the Ybor City Museum Society and the Baseball Museum.
Yes, the Tampa Baseball Museum.
Thank you. Well, welcome to Culture Vultures.
Thank you for having us.
We look forward to hearing all about both of these wonderful places. Now, you're in Ybor City. People might not be familiar with physically the buildings you're in. So would you describe at first where the Ybor City Museum Society is located?
Sure. The Museum Society is on a state park property, which is down in the heart of Ybor City. We're on 9th Avenue at 19th Street, so a few blocks off of 7th Avenue, which is the street that I think most people are familiar with in Ybor City. But we're right off Centennial Park, so that's where the Ybor Saturday Market is. So maybe people might be familiar with that block of Ybor City, but we're adjacent to the Centennial Park.
And if you were driving and you were using the interstate I-4, you get off at the Ybor City exit.
Yeah, at the 21st and 22nd Street exit. And there's actually signs when you get off for the State Museum. So
tell us about the wonderful structure that you're located in.
The Ybor City Museum State Park is located in an old bakery building. It was the Ferlita family bakery. The building is from the 1920s. It was built in 1923 to replace a wooden building that had burned down. But the ovens were original to the first building, and they rebuilt another bakery around the original ovens. And so it's kind of a neat structure. In the Tampa Baseball Museum, which is just around the corner from where the bakery building is in the former home of Al Lopez, who is Tampa's first major leaguer, the first Hall of Famer, first major league manager, so a lot of firsts. But he lived in that house for nearly 50 years, and it was moved from its original location in Ybor City to right around the corner from the current state park. And so that's where the Baseball Museum will be located.
That's poetic justice.
It is.
To have the Baseball Museum in a baseball hero's home.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right.
And he was one of Tampa's, favorite sons. Oh,
absolutely. I mean, he's born in Ybor City. He was a really inspirational figure because he was just like everybody else. He wasn't from any special family or did anything that anybody else wasn't doing. He just played baseball on the sand lots with everybody else. It just so happened that somebody that was in town during spring training for the Washington Senators happened to see him catching, which is the position that he played, and asked him to come out and help them catch balls during some practicing that they were doing before some spring training games. And that's really how he got sort of his leg in the door. So when he became a major leaguer, other people from the community were like, well, if he can do it, then maybe so can I, because we played right along each other, alongside each other. And so he was a really inspirational figure.
And really that's why we're building the Baseball Museum. It's said to be the front porch of baseball in Tampa. We want to inspire especially the young children all the way through school. We're going to have tremendous children's programs, and we have an education center that looks like a mini diamond inside the Baseball Museum with, we're going to have touchscreens and video available in the museum. So a big purpose for us is to educate and inspire young children.
Oh, that's great.
As well as adults, of course.
So, is the Baseball Museum open?
No, it's not open yet. We're currently finishing up the exhibits and creating programming, and we expect to open before the next spring training for 2017.
So next spring?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Well, that will be something we're all looking forward to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it will be in one older home that's been made into this museum?
Absolutely.
Filled with exhibitions that are interactive. That's Pretty exciting.
One of the things that we're very grateful to is the support of the community in two ways. They have donated approximately 1,500 artifacts, some of which will be in the museum.
What sort of artifacts?
I'm going to let Liz answer that.
All kinds of things, from what you would expect to get from baseball artifacts: gloves, bats, jerseys, hats, all the way down to programs from games, ticket stubs from games, baseball cards, everything that you can sort of think of, from the smallest little item all the way through to, like I said, big jerseys. And we even have stadium seats from Old Al Lopez Field.
Oh, really?
Absolutely. So a good cross section, and it all is a community effort. I mean, when we started the baseball museum, we didn't have a standing collection that we were building the museum around. We ended up with the house offered to us, and then decided, well, yes, we absolutely have to have a museum and use this house that we have. So it was a grassroots effort to go into the community and find people that had been collecting for years, reach out to former players, and to have items donated. So
that's so much fun. I was reading about the new museum that's opening this month in Washington, about
the African American Museum. Yes,
and that they began similarly without a collection, and they put the word out to the country. Please share with us objects that you have, and they got, just I think 35,000 objects, some of which were really.
And some of the stuff they've got is absolutely amazing. Absolutely.
Which brings me to the question. Weren't there, at the time they were called Negro baseball leagues in Tampa?
Oh yeah, we had several different teams, as many as 20 at one time, that played in different versions of Negro leagues, from an amateur all the way up to a statewide Negro League that we had teams that participated in. But yes, we had a robust Negro League system in Tampa. We had a lot of African Americans and also a lot of Afro-Cubans that lived in our community, that were all forced to play on separate teams from the white citizens that wanted to play baseball, obviously during Jim Crow.
Right. And then that changed in the 60s?
In the 60s, once Jackie Robinson broke the color line very famously, it didn't necessarily mean that immediately all teams started allowing integration on the fields, and at local levels it tended to trickle down a little bit slower. So by the late 60s, early 70s in Tampa, all those leagues had dissolved, and teams became integrated.
So I know that we have pony leagues. Those are the younger people who've been tremendously successful here. How many years have we won, or I
don't. I'm not sure exactly how, because there's so many different youth leagues.
Okay.
So there's Little League, there's Pony League, there's American Legion. There's a lot of different sort of youth programs, and then within each Little League, there are 21 different Little Leagues that are in Tampa, and they're all geographically based.
I had no idea.
Oh yeah. So and you have to go to the Little League that's within your sort of district, so you can't hop along. So it really is representational of the neighborhood talent. West Tampa Little League was the first local Tampa Little League to win a Little League World Series, and that was in 1970. But then since then, there have been, I know Citrus Park, not terribly long ago, went. West Tampa has gone several times. Belmont Heights was a team that Dwight Gooden and Gary Sheffield, they all played on the Belmont Heights team, and they went.
That's a very rich history.
Absolutely.
One of the interesting things about baseball in Tampa is that we have one of the highest concentration of professional players coming from here because of the training that they got in the various leagues that Liz has mentioned. So we have almost 90 professional players from Tampa alone.
Really?
Right.
Yeah, for major leagues. That's not even for minor leagues, there's hundreds more that have gone out to the minors, but in the major leagues, we have almost 90.
Who's done the research to track down these players and see if they have artifacts to offer?
I've done some, and we've had a lot of help. A lot of, all of the players that have gone on to play in the majors didn't get there without the help of, coaches along the way.
Right.
And so we've reached out a lot to, especially high school coaches that have been very helpful in connecting us with their former students and former
they're
players.
Proud of, I'm sure.
Absolutely. And they, have maintained fantastic relationships with them. For an example, Kevin Cash, our current Rays manager, went to Gaither, and his former coach, Kevin Cash, has given him season tickets for every year, and he comes and sits right behind the dugout. And so, there's still a very strong bond between sort of high school coach and student. So we've
had some very well-known people come and help us too. The Al Lopez's family, his son and his grandchildren, have been very involved, and they've helped direct us to the right people. We've had Lou Pinella, who has been super supportive, and some wonderful artifacts from him. His favorite glove with a hole in it, for one. And Tony LaRussa, Tina Martinez, the University of Tampa, University of South Florida, have all been so very helpful to us in directing us to where we can get this history.
That's really fun, and it weaves it into the community, and that's what you want. And it's also a way for young people who may not realize that this too is history, to help broaden their consciousness about what museums have to offer.
Absolutely.
And how they might be excited about what's there.
Absolutely. A lot of times people don't think of sports as being a representation of the culture of a city. So I think it's interesting to sort of talk about issues that have affected our community and help build our community, but using sports as a lens to do that. And baseball is just such an easy way to talk about so many different things going on in a community throughout its history. So we're excited to make that connection for people between your sports, and that's a sort of wing of your cultural community's identity.
Just a few days ago, I was talking to some people from the Hillsborough County Arts Council.
Yes.
And one of them made this wonderful observation. She said, this is a great project because you all have taken sports and you're going to teach history and heritage through sports. And of course, sports is very representative, first of all, of the Ybor City community,
right,
the greater Tampa community, and cultural diversity. So we're really excited. We keep thinking about and rediscovering lessons that are going to be in this museum. We're just going to have wonderful opportunities to constantly be changing the educational opportunities that will be there.
Well, I remember years ago, I did marketing for the Tampa Museum of Art, and we had a show called Art and Sports, and it was the most highly attended show we ever had.
Absolutely.
To that date. So there's a tremendous interest from the community in sports and in baseball, and how great that you all sort of took the initiative to do this.
Yes.
And you saved an old house, which I just
love. And we did, exactly, which was just icing on the cake.
And I do want to say that we've had community support not only for the artifacts, but financial support. We've had
Good.
The FDOT made the house available to us. The City of Tampa and Hillsborough County provided grants and other support so that we had some initial funding to get this project started. And then corporations and individuals have been extremely generous, for everywhere from $10 to tens of thousands of dollars. So we are very, very grateful for the fact that we've had that support all along.
Well, and will continue, I'm sure, as people discover it after it opens.
Yes.
Because some people don't really get excited about something unless they're able to experience it directly. An abstract project in the future is a little vague, but
when you actually can see it and touch it, yep.
That's great.
Yeah, we're almost to the point where you can actually going to be able to see it soon.
So we're looking for this in the spring of 2017. Well, that's not so far away.
It is not.
Looking forward to it. And now back to the mother collection, the Ybor City Museum. So tell us about what's on there now, and just why don't we start by describing what the experience is of going there.
Well, the museum, as Liz mentioned, is in the old Ferlita Bakery. And so when you walk in, what you see is sort of an overview of what was Tampa like in the late 1800s. Because Vicente Martinez Ybor came in 1885 looking for a place to begin the cigar industry, the tobacco industry. And he fell in love with Ybor. The city of Tampa helped him acquire the land. And in a year...
He named it after himself.
He named it after himself. Actually, the little story is he named it after his mother, because in the Spanish tradition, his name is Vicente Martinez Ybor. And Martinez would be his father, and Ybor would be his mother.
I didn't realize that. That's really cool.
So if he had not had such esteem for his mother, it would be Martinez City instead of Ybor City.
That's so great. I've heard a million stories about Ybor City, and I'd never made that connection that was his mom's name. I love it.
Right. So, the first cigar was made in 1886, April 13th. The first cigar was made April 13th, 1886. It wasn't made in Ybor's factory. It was made in Sanchez Aya factory. And there the story begins, because were it not for the cigar industry, Tampa would not have been what it is today, or certainly not grown as quickly. That was, the cigar industry probably contributed half the revenues to the city of Tampa in its heyday. And
Half the revenues in property taxes? Wow.
right.
That's really
So
significant.
it was significant, and also is a reason why the population grew so quickly, because Ybor brought cigar makers from Cuba, and people came from Sicily, they came from Spain, and we also had some Romanian Jews come and set up a lot of different shops in Ybor City. There were over 90 buildings owned by Jewish merchants at one time in Ybor City.
Which all means that Tampa's not a boring, typical southern town, because you had this wave of immigrants to make it interesting.
Absolutely. And in our foods, in our art, in our traditions, you can still see traces of these cultures everywhere we go.
Absolutely.
And so we're kind of excited that we created a program called Traces of Cuba this year.
Very timely with the new air flights directly from Tampa to Havana.
Indeed, and it's 5 different events that are very different. One is a new exhibit that will be at the Ybor City Museum State Park for at least a year. And then we're having Dr. Roberto Gonzalez Echavarria come and give a presentation to the Cuban Club. That's October 21st, and October 20th is the exhibit unveiling, but of course it will remain afterwards. We are taping Dr. Gonzalez. Again, he uses that Spanish tradition. And he's written a book about baseball and Cuba. What he's going to do is
Really?
Yes.
That sort of ties both museums
Right.
together. I love it.
He was born in Cuba, but he grew up in Ybor City, and he has been wildly successful as being a professor at Yale University. When
A history professor?
he's a Yale University Sterling Professor of Hispanic and Comparative Literatures, and so we're just so honored that he's going to be coming to speak at the Italian Club. We're going to tape it, and it'll be available for posterity. But one of the things that he's going to do is he's going to do a sort of an overview of what the cigar industry meant to baseball, and what in Tampa, and what the sugar industry meant to baseball in Cuba. So I think it's going to be a very interesting presentation.
Wow, that sounds great. And that's in conjunction with an actual physical exhibit that'll be in the museum.
Yes, and I'm going to let Liz tell you about the exhibit and what's going to be in it.
Well, and I want to clarify for those of us who are watching that Chantal is the COO of the museum and Elizabeth is the curator. So you both work with both museums in
Yes.
complementary capacities.
Absolutely. But the Traces of Cuba exhibit, Chantal mentioned that there are traces of the relationship between our immigrant communities of the past and the modern Tampa that we live in today, that you can see those traces all around you. And the exhibit will look at some of those modern traces, like why do we have so many crews that for Gasparilla that celebrate aspects of Cuban liberty? So looking at the impact of the Spanish-American War and the War for Cuban independence, when we had the Rough Riders in town. Why do we have a Rough Rider crew? Why do we have a Buffalo Soldiers crew? So looking at those kinds of things, looking at our foods and our drink, which clearly have a Cuban influence. Looking at why do we have a park that is an actual piece of Cuba in Ybor City, and what was that influence that Jose Marti had in, why would he come here so many times? So looking at some of those kinds of issues and trying to figure out why we have these little traces that are all around us.
I've traveled in Europe and seen so many references to Jose Marti. He is more internationally known and recognized than most anyone I can think of from Tampa. And yet here, his fame is only beginning to be sort of celebrated.
Right.
And you all are ground zero for that. So that's marvelous.
Absolutely.
Do you find that you get European visitors who are
A lot.
connected?
Yeah, a lot of the visitors that come to the Ybor City Museum State Park are international, and a lot are European. So.
And the new opening of Cuba seems to have opened interest in Martí, because obviously he was a liberator of Cuba in the late 1800s.
I think that it's great, and
Right.
what's wonderful is that you're just up the street from the park, and we must mention that you have a beautiful, beautiful park adjacent to the museum.
We do. The museum itself is housed in the bakery building, but the state park is the entire block, the whole city block, and it encompasses not just the museum building and the Fralita Bakery, but a series of historic homes that were moved onto the site, one of which has been sort of done as though a family in the late 1800s or early 1900s is still living there. So there's a child's room and a living room and a bedroom and a kitchen that have been interpreted to show life in that period,
and
that
that's
people
really
can tour.
because it gives you a flavor of what it was like, which was very cramped and very
yes,
close
the
together.
house is very small. We always joke when we take kids through, like, what is missing in this house, and it takes them a couple of minutes to figure it out, and they suddenly realize there's no bathroom. And so we have an outhouse that's out behind the house,
so
and
funny.
that usually flips them out.
I thought you were going to say no television. Which
Well, yeah, where's the Nintendo is always question too, but yeah, they always freak out.
But in the same way that the Tenement Museum in New York gives a
Yes.
flavor of what life was like at the turn of the last century, this gives a sense of what was going on in Tampa.
Well, it does. The rooms are tiny, everything's cramped, it's dark, so yes, it definitely gives people sort of that feel. But then connecting the museum building and the smaller houses is a giant courtyard. So there's a beautiful fountain. The state park actually just redid all of the plantings to make them all Florida friendly, so now it's a
that's
completely
smart.
Florida friendly environment. So we're able to interpret what that means to have a Florida friendly environment, and if you wanted to do plantings in your own yard, what your choices should be. And then it's just a beautiful space for rentals or for an afternoon for your lunch. So it's just a really nice
charming.
It's an oasis sort of in the middle of an urban space, so it's a very nice asset.
And a great sculpture of Mr. Ybor, Senor
Absolutely.
Ybor.
We're very excited that so many people have their weddings there or corporate events in the garden, and we love to have our own events there. So in addition to exhibit openings and so forth, we are inaugurating a Noche Buena, which is Christmas Eve in the Latin tradition. So on November 10th, in our own museum garden, we will have a Christmas Eve dinner with all the traditional foods. We've actually been consulting with 2 people who actually came from Cuba, so that we get very authentic foods and drinks beyond what the black beans and rice
Right.
and roast pork, which of course you have to have.
Wasn't there fish that was part of this too?
The
The guy who used to have the fish market on 7th Avenue talked about importing something slightly unusual that was traditional.
That might have been more for the Italians and the
Okay,
Cubans. So,
okay.
so we're going to do lots of different Noche Buenas over the years.
I love that.
We're going to do the Cuban this year, and then next year we'll either do the Sicilian or the Spanish. And then I would love to have something that commemorates the Jewish population, some sort of events.
Hanukkah.
A Hanukkah, yeah, that
That's
would be
great.
perfect. So we really do want to incorporate that. There is a cookbook by Ferdy Pacheco, who is very well known in Tampa for his art, that actually incorporates the Jewish traditions and along with the Latin tradition. So we're pretty excited about this new event that will continue.
That's great. And you also do an Ybor tour every year. Is that in the spring?
It is, and I know you have served as our tour guide at different times, and I hope you'll come again this year. It's Cuban themed this year, and it'll be in March. I don't remember exactly the date.
But basically, if
March.
people want to plug into what is going on, because you all have a lot going on, they should just go to your website.
Absolutely. Yeah, we have a special Traces of Cuba tab on our website,
Great.
so all the events related to Traces of Cuba can easily be found straight from our homepage.
I love this. I think it's so much fun. Personally, as someone who loves old buildings, I love the fact that your museums are sited in repurposed old buildings. And I love
Absolutely.
the fact that when people come to you and hear the stories, then they become passionate about our history and wanting to protect what we still have.
Absolutely. Ybor City, people come down there to eat dinner, to have some drinks, and I don't think they realize some of what's gone on in those buildings and for how long, and what Ybor City really was to the Tampa community in the early 1900s. And so we're always happy, especially for so many transplants that are living in Tampa that come from elsewhere and maybe just don't realize, this was such a big cigar community.
And don't you all have a walking tour also?
We do. It's web-based, so you can access it from your mobile device. Just out there in the world, it's free. It's discoverybor.org, so you just click into it, and it just starts to lead you on your way. And it has audio and pictures and written descriptions of each of the buildings that are on the tour to give people an idea of the history and what went on in certain buildings that now don't hold those same purposes.
That's great. And I hope that you're recording the memories of some of the Ybor citizens who are older, because it's a generation that will not be here forever.
No, sad to say, but that's for sure.
Actually, we do have an ongoing oral histories project.
Wonderful.
And this year we will have Lizette Campos interview 15 different people with Cuban heritage as part of this particular Traces of Cuba project.
Well, we have 1 minute till this show is over. What haven't I asked? What do we need to share with our viewers?
Well, we just wanted to encourage everybody to come to Ybor City, to visit our website at ybormuseum.org and see what cultural things are available at any given time. And by all means, stop by the current Ybor City Museum State Park and the future Tampa Baseball Museum at the Al Lopez House.
And you have a good store. Let us not forget.
We have a store.
That's delightful.
Right.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Chantal. It was a pleasure hearing about what's there now, what's coming up in a few months. I'm very pleased for our city that we have this resource, because we have great stories and they're worth preserving and telling and sharing. So thank you for what you do. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Linda. It's just been a lot of fun to be here today with you.
Good, good. And thank all of you for joining us today on Culture Vultures.